Hello viewers, I'm Navin Berry. I'm the editor of DiConversations. Happy to bring to you this episode of DiConversations, a panel discussion on India's foreign policy, challenges in our neighborhood as a new government takes place. Is there a need for a course correction? Has our policy worked? What are the kind of new imperatives before us? Our neighborhood is a common family for us for decades. We have a shared historical, cultural affinity with them. We eat the same food, we live the same life. We are actually one family. But in recent years, some new aberrations have surfaced. We need to find a common ground. We need to find relationships that work for all of us equally as shared neighborhood. A neighborhood for our common prosperity and goodwill. So enjoy the episode, an episode which features some of the best bureaucrats, ambassadors, retired ambassadors, generals, journalists. So here's the follow. Thank you.
So, before we get to sort of country by country, because, the terrain is quite vast, let me just start from a slightly panoramic picture. When Prime Minister Modi began his first term with the Neighbourhood First policy, very strategically well-calculated visit, followed by a very successful visit to Nepal. It seemed as though, and the swearing-in ceremony where he invited a lot of the neighbours, it seemed as though there was going to be something fresh about the Neighbourhood First policy. There are countries with whom our relations still remain good. For example, Sri Lanka has been a rocky relationship, but over the Sri Lankan debt crisis, we have come out perhaps better than, let's say, our immediate competitor, China. In Maldives, it has been a rocky relationship for close to 10 years, and at this point, it's probably the worst ever. In Nepal, it has been a steadily rocky relationship. But the common point is this, that I think broadly, whichever government it has been, whether it has been a Gujarat government or a Modi government or a Indira Gandhi government, we've had two templates at looking at our neighbor. One is to act as the good big brother, and one is to act as the tough big brother. And the problem is that neither have worked. And it's about time that we started developing an adult relationship and a respectful relationship with our neighbors. And can we have an adult relationship that's at the same time magnanimous or at the same time somewhat asymmetrical? But it's because it's understood as the only country that actually has borders with all the others except Afghanistan, if you don't include Pakistan coming in the way. They share borders with us, but not necessarily with each other at all. So I think the framework in which we have cast our neighbourhood policy, which has been either good big brother or bad big brother, I think we need to break out of that framework and come to a new kind of template. And that template, I should call it as a non-adolescent, more adult.
What does it mean to call it adult?
So it's a relationship where we are not talking down on them, that we are not acting bossy, that we are not acting, oh, aap log itne chote ho ki let us be so kind and nice to you. So we need to get out of both those things.
Raghavan, would you like to give your perspective on what Gautam has just mentioned?
Well, in my view, I agree with Gautam, but I would say that when we look at our neighbourhood, it's always all neighbourhood relationships. This is not just India and its neighbours, all over the world. They are always rocky relationships because the heart of a country's foreign policy is its neighbourhood policy. For the past quarter century, till relatively recently, our general approach to neighbourhood relations had two components. By far the more important component was the bilateral one, but there was always a narrative within which that bilateral relationship was embedded, which was of regional cooperation. I think in the last 10 years, the regional cooperation aspect has suffered very greatly. So you are left without a narrative.
Is it possible that for all the economic assistance that we are advancing towards, say, Sri Lanka, we talked about their economic crisis, we were the first to bail them out. Nepal, we have ongoing projects. Maldives, we said, as you said, that they are so heavily dependent on us. The ground rules are changing. they are trying to find out solutions where they are not dependent on it.
Yes.
Sri Lanka is finding majorly more economic assistance from China. China is all around. China has deeper pockets than us. So China is also able to be more aggressive. I don't think they are also accountable for how they are holding their dialogue with the governments in power. We relatively are more vulnerable to inspection, what we are doing as a democracy.
I think we have changed the goalposts. Till 2019 or 2020, we were desperate to get Chinese tourists. It's because your bilateral relationship has suffered that you're no longer talking about that. But 2015, 16, 17, your main priority was to bring India somehow on the Chinese external tourism map. Now, because of our bilateral relationship, we don't talk about that, but you can't change the goalposts for your neighborhood. You see, the China factor provides an opportunity and an option to your neighbors which didn't exist earlier. You can't say that you're taking advantage of your relations with me by opening up to someone else. No, the real world doesn't work like that.
Iqbal, from a journalistic point of view, just confining yourself to these three countries,
I would like to leapfrog back into what Ambassador Gautam talked about China, because I think that is the biggest foreign policy challenge and even economic policy challenge that is going to face the new government that's going to be sworn in early June. And the reason behind that is that the Chinese have today got a very big stake in what we call POK, because they have invested around $28 billion in building the Bunji Dam and the Diamond Pasha Dam, which is going to generate 40 gigawatt hours of electricity, which is all being routed to northern China, where 85% of the population live and which has got an electricity shortage. And the waters of the glaciers in the Himalayas, there are 262 glaciers in the Karakorams and in the Himalayas, which are now in the process of melting because of global warming. And the Chinese have anticipated that. And alongside these dams, they are building vast reservoirs, almost 75, 80 kilometers long, 15 kilometers wide, to store the water. And the passage of the water is through Ladakh. I would like to just complete.
No, please, if you allow me, let's come back to the three countries we are talking. We'll come to China, we'll come to POK. POK is a very important issue because India has said we want POK back. So we'll come to POK.
I really don't know much about the other three countries, so I'll...
Jagat, you want to say something?
I think sir said enough on these three countries.
But is there something new that we can do? Is the new government going to do something?
May I just say something?
Yes.
Before you can have the last word. See, I feel one thing has got to do with consistency. Our foreign policy has also changed with the governments, especially in the past, let's say, few decades. If you just compare it to the foreign policy of, let's say, our neighboring countries, there has been much more consistency. So, if we are consistent with our neighbors, and I can talk more about the defense part of it. You take Maldives, for example, the amount of aid that they have asked of us and the amount of aid that we've promised them but not given. And last point is regarding China and Pakistan. Regarding, again, we had to take a lot economically. Like you said, we moved China for a long time, but militarily, they were always our enemy. Our military teaching has always been that China is Chandal and Pakistan is Narc. If we have done our entire military training, tactical training as well as strategic thinking at higher levels, it has always been that these two are our confirmed enemies. So we have never taken them as friends as far as the military thinking is concerned.
Gautam? He's saying our policy has not been consistent. We have also faulted in our delivery. And the kind of assistance that, as I mentioned earlier in slightly different context, China has deep pockets. We think we are throwing a little few peanuts and we think we are doing plenty.
So General Singh, I think, is right in pointing out to what I would call underperformance. But there have been areas where we have performed also. For example, in Afghanistan, we have performed under very adverse circumstances and also got the rewards. And there are many other kind of ironies. But what seems to be more important, since earlier you raised the issue of China, is one major historic change that we and our neighbors have had to face, and they have had an opportunity in this, is that for the first time, it used to be South Asia was considered India's backyard. Even China basically treated South Asia as your backyard, and they didn't necessarily meddle. Now China is all over South Asia, and our neighbors realize that they are not in the monopoly of India anymore, that they can play the China card vis-a-vis India. And ironically, and this comes back to another issue, ironically they don't mind falling into the clutches of China, but they mind very much falling into our clutches. So there are certain,
What could be the possible reason for that kind of psychology? That
what you pointed out just now, and then one of the ugliest examples of that was in the Nepal earthquake.
we went to town.
We went to town with that. So, this is the sort of thing when I say that we act, like the big brother and almost, rub it in. And psychologically, it affects our smaller neighbors, that they feel that their noses have been rubbed in the dirt.
And ironically, again, to use that word, I feel, because I know in some of these countries, not as an officer or as a government employee, but as I have a tourism connect with these countries. They are more socially, culturally with us as a community. When I go to Sri Lanka, the kind of friends we have there, with their God Buddha and us, the whole of Pakistan, the Hindu, we have a very major, and we eat the same food. I can't understand what have they in common with the Chinese. Nothing.
Whether it is a Muslim from Pakistan or Afghanistan, half their pilgrimage spots outside the
Our cultural affinity with the Pakistanis is.
But the thing is, it's very different when you meet them socially and very different when you deal with them on a professional basis. So socially we've interacted and served with Pakistani officers abroad in UN mission. It's like you're together all the time. You'll be one amongst your closest. But their attitude and their way.
So are you saying that at a personal level they are all in love with us?
At personal level they are friendly with us.
But when it comes to government.
But something
racist
but they always have a hidden agenda, so you have to be very careful and clear about that. Pakistan has been has written so much on Pakistan.
So would you say there is a need for a course correction somewhere with at least these three countries?
So I don't think we should necessarily demonize them as somehow their attitudes are bad. They also have their concepts.
They also have things,
yeah.
And like you said, China has not been interested in South Asia. If that was the case, they've been friendly with Pakistan right from the beginning and very close friends.
I had a
And
question.
63, Shamsam Valley was handed over to
I had a question which I kept for later for discussion, but somewhere I get prompted to ask this, that we are trying to also keep our various doors open with regard to big powers, with regard to whom we support, whom we don't support. We are saying we support everybody. Why do we expect Nepal or Sri Lanka to say we only support you? They will also want to keep their back covered to say we are also friends with China. So how do we learn to respect, as you said, that they will have also relationships with other countries?
So that's exactly, sir, both of you from the foreign service, your interests of your country.
I think in the last few years, this aspect about boasting about what you're doing especially with Maldives and Sri Lanka and Nepal has turned out to be totally counterproductive. So there should be a course correction. With Maldives, the way we tom-toms locating one or two aircraft and one helicopter over there, it was bound to happen the kind of reaction which there was. Because the fact is that we are the cultural hegemon in all these countries. I think these problems are always there with your neighbors.
Hospital
the
Maldives have a hospital in your backyard.
They can't run away anywhere.
We already had a hospital there.
Yeah.
Instead of cashing on that, we lost that.
But I think the China factor has made us lose our balance, and we have excessively securitized all these relationships. We don't talk about cooperative frameworks. We emphasize the security aspect. We emphasize their dependence on us excessively, and I think that really calls for a course correction.
Ambassador, if I may comment on Nepalese claim on Indian territory with Dharchula. I think that's a new and a very big irritant. So
You should ask why it emerged. Why did it emerge?
She's talking about the
Nepalese claim on
Kalapani
Indian
issue.
territory.
It's been there for such a long time. Why did it become such an issue?
Kalapani.
I think there you have to see how you approach the issue and the maps you issue.
As Ambassador Gautam mentioned, they are finding ways and means to drum up issues, to put you down and use that opportunity to say China is also a friend. So,
I think the Nepal issue, if if one is clear, the issue actually acquired its present cutting edge after the 2019 legislative changes, when you came out with a new map of J&K. And that is what, otherwise it was on the back burner for years together, nobody even heard about.
but also the fact that each of these countries have their own political compulsions internally.
Yes.
So Maldives had to come out with a Quit India campaign. Nepal is doing something or the other. Sri Lanka has got some other angles going on happening. Is it possible that we are actually getting less and less relevance within our own backyard, which is very detrimental for our security in the future?
So, there is a related question. This problem, let's say Dharchula, has been there for a long time. All this time it has been dealt with quietly, discreetly. So the question is, why have they suddenly felt the need to make such a hype over it, to go public with it, to issue stamps which show the boundary marked in that area, and
They've got their rupee note now.
sorry, it's not stamps,
Currency notes.
Currency notes.
Currency.
So, there is something that there is a grievance. There is something that is very annoying at them, which they are finally taking it out in these ways. They also know that to some extent they have the protection or the cover of China behind them, and all this is important. But the fundamental question is, why can't these be dealt with? Differences will always be there. There will also be boundary issues. Why can't these be dealt quietly? Why are they becoming politicized? Because obviously this is playing to some gallery. Why is there that gallery in the first place? So I think.
But assuming the gallery will exist, because
One of the issues of Nepal happened, as a fallout of Agniveer also.
Correct.
And it's a major issue.
That's
which
true.
has not come out in the open.
Yeah.
And a lot of senior officers have talked about this to highest levels in the government, that please review the policy for the recruitment of the Gorkhas from Nepal. You cannot have the same yardstick as you're having for the rest. You cannot, we had so many Gorkha battalions in India, they are now going to slowly be finished, which most people are not aware about. And you're going to get mixed of hill troops and then mixed of other. And a friend of mine, when he spoke to somebody, he was told that, they don't vote for us. Yet, we have pension paying officers there, we have, supporting them in various means, their families come here, so you had a huge support base spread across villages and small
That's a
towns.
base of goodwill that
And
people
base
have
of goodwill,
actually,
which we are
captured upon
totally
our
losing.
exercise.
And this has, and
That's a base of goodwill that we've never used, never exercised, to reach out to all those
I would say that is the
ex-servicemen.
legacy of the last 10 years.
that has just
we have
happened.
lost a lot of political capital
Yes.
in our neighborhood.
And this is in spite of the fact, to be this thing, that the last three people in top, like the present CDS, the previous CDS, General Bipin Rawat, and the previous chief, General Jagatbir Singh, are all Gorkhas. And they've tried their level best, and I can assure you it is not moved
In
forward.
addition to that, let me tell you, it's not only the friendship part, it's also the stock.
Yeah.
The best stock of the Gurkhas in the Gurkha battalions came from Nepal.
Nepal.
Okay, because we are a very small population of Nepalese within India, and not many of them want to join this line. But for the Gurkhas living in Nepal, it was a matter of
Right.
pride to join the Indian
And now you
army.
hear
And
about
it was
Gorkha
best
troops
stock.
in Ukraine, Gorkhas joining the
Now
Chinese
what's going to
army.
happen is those Gurkhas who had been absorbed into the Indian
Yes.
army will be absorbed into the People's Liberation Army.
I'll give you a
Because the
small
Chinese will
instance,
recruit
sir.
them
And
and use them against us.
We may be digressing.
Yes.
I was in staff college, I was instructor, we had, people coming from all over. Historically, we've had people from Sri Lanka attending our courses throughout. Suddenly, one guy went to the market, they all go, he was asked Sri Lankan, oh, yeah, oh, it became such a uproar. Jayalalitha was in power. Next day she said, I want them out. It was not this government, it was the previous government, Manmohan Singh government. Within 1 week, a historical legacy of Sri Lankan officers coming and training there were out. And I told the commandant that day, I said, sir, you cut them off and they land up in Pakistan. A week later, there's a photograph with General Kiani with those officers welcome there. I mean, we just lose out on minor internal political decisions because of you want police.
So they don't come for staff
They
policy?
stopped also because it's
End of story.
End of
It's not
story.
resumed.
No, because there's a difference between the Tamils and the Sinhalese. So if a Tamil government has taken such a strong stance against Sinhalese coming there, whether Jayalalitha, whether it's DMK, it's the stock is the same.
I have a question.
They say once you've done
I have a
this,
question
what should I
on
say now?
Jagat is saying. Today, Raja Mohan has an article. I don't know if you read it. He is talking about sub-regional plots in terms of foreign policy in our neighborhood.
He's talking about territory swap. To swap that.
But if you talk of sub-regional plot, the
Sub-regional-
LTT, the
Sub-regional
IPK was a
plots.
sub-regional
He's talking
plot,
about
which
sub-regional
is thrust
plots,
upon
and
you.
what he's summing up to say that a strong government like Modi may have done differently, except that regional parties in Tamil Nadu or in Punjab, they don't play ball with him. And
That's not quite true.
No.
Because if you look at one of the most, the excellent example of sub-regional cooperation was the cross-LOC trade between J&K and POK. That was not stopped by the state government, it was stopped by the union government. Similarly, Punjab to Punjab cooperation was not stopped by any of the Punjab parties.
It's absolutely right. Punjabis want trade with Pakistan. Food convoy is going through to Afghanistan. Anything going to Afghanistan is stopped. Once the trade stopped, naturally everything
See, my
stopped.
reading in the good days when we had the composite dialogue, you had the composite dialogue, dealing with the problems. You had the military to military confidence building measures, including,
See, when you had military to military confidence, these measures, there are two stories which are very successful, which everybody knows, most people know about. One is that aircraft that was shot down, and that guy was returned within 2 days. The second thing is actually what happened, there's a helicopter of ours that stayed across Siachen and landed the other side. And there was a DGMO to DGMO hotline activated, and within 6 hours the helicopter, the people were back.
And just to complete the point, so you had the political level, resolution of conflict areas, you had military to military confidence building. At the people level, you had cricket matches, you had cultural exchanges, musicians coming here, coming there. The only thing Nawaz Sharif tried very hard, and I'm sure TCA Raghavan can add to it, tried very hard to get the trade started. And he was doing it as a businessman himself and a Punjabi himself. That was one, and arguably that if they had been able to get the trade process started, then that entire composite dialogue would have taken a different momentum. And my understanding is that it was the military that really put its foot down there, because they realized that
The Pakistan military.
that the narrative will go out of there,
You see,
and it will go into the civilian politician.
Pakistan military is always controlled Pakistan, whether they control it directly or indirectly, they own the.
so moving ahead, China. My single initial spark was to say that in March, our exports with China had gone high enough.
Exports?
Or
They've gone down.
Sorry, imports
Trade
have
has gone high.
Imports have gone
Over
up.
$100 billion
To make
trade
China
deficit.
the biggest trading partner for India. You have the biggest
It's not
trading
yet the
partner.
biggest trading partner, this US is the biggest trading partner.
No, China is the biggest.
No.
Achha, कोई बात नहीं. China is the biggest trading partner as of March. They have put US behind. And at a time when we are saying that we have problems with China, the stalemate continues. Our official stance is that they have not occupied any territory. There are discussions, there are perceptions, differences in perceptions of what is your land, what is my land, etc., etc. I suppose that is it. But question here is, what next for the new government?
See, sir, the basic problem with all our neighbors, with our two immediate neighbors, that is Pakistan and China, for the security thing, the first major problem, if you resolve that, everything else is secondary, I look at it. And that is the borders. You are not clear on any borders. A lieutenant governor, a governor of a state has said the other day that our borders with China are invisible. A general has got up and said that in written Pannu, he said that defending the undefined is how he put his tenure.
So the resolution is not in our hands?
The resolution has to be done, but for a resolution to take place, there has to be give and take. Today, your Home Minister said we will reoccupy POK. He said that, has he talked of Gilgit-Baltistan, had he talked of upsiting? All is in the same map.
How is he going to wish away the Diamond Basha and Bunji dams?
Huh.
How is he going to wish
Yeah, he
away the
can't.
Chinese army?
So-
How is he going to wish away the 60,000 Chinese
So
troops
this
facing us
was
in
my
Eastern
question.
Ladakh?
So the-
How serious are we about this POK?
Even more important than this issue is the impact of this China trade, which has led to a de-industrialization of the Indian economy over the last 15 years. The trade deficit has gone from about $25 billion in the last 10 years to over $100 billion. And our biggest problem today is of generating employment. And those industries, metal manufacture, chemical engineering, that could generate employment have been wiped out by this liberal policy of allowing Chinese imports. They have destroyed our industry. And how is that industry going to come back? And how are the jobs going to be created? And who is going to finance this trade deficit? Because at this rate, the way it is going, it will probably reach, in the next 5 years, it will reach $150 billion. Who is going to pay for this?
No, but my question to you is that we said 4 months ago, 6 months ago, that we are going to put curbs on the import of laptops and things like that. 47% surge in March in import of laptops.
Because until you develop your own capacity,
You
capability.
have
his
no
point
value
is that-
addition. You have no value addition of any consequence here. Even these Apple phones, iPhones that we are exporting, $14 billion. The import of the sub-assemblies is $12 billion. You're hardly doing any value addition of any consequence. So who are we fooling? We're only helping traders who are actually bringing in the Chinese goods and they're turning them around and selling them here, or they're re-exporting them. So what is this kind of policy? It doesn't make any sense. Nobody's looking at this.
With Pakistan, we have not covered.
No, but sir,
Standalone Pakistan.
please listen to me for 2 minutes. I want to say that we should not talk about in terms of strategic defense matters, because one of your opening narrative was that let us discuss strategic defense issues in our neighborhood. So when we discuss strategic defense issues, I do not think that we should talk about China and Pakistan as two different countries. I think very strongly these two have combined as one enemy and we should treat them equally. Earlier in India we used to have a primary front and a secondary front. Today we can't define a primary front and a secondary front. Secondly, the amount of infrastructure that the Chinese have built within Pakistan, where Sir would bear me out, nothing stops the Chinese to come around even from that side. Look, these are all possibilities, and I feel where we are lacking on the strategic part is our anticipation. If we anticipated correctly, probably Kargil wouldn't have happened, or 1947 Kashmir wouldn't have happened.
I fully endorse General Saab's views about what he was talking about this Chinese, and it's a very
Collusive.
issue. You look at one thing, that from the Defence Minister Anthony to Defence Minister Arun Jaitley to Defence Minister Sitaraman, Defence Minister Parikar, and the latest Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, everybody has been timid in their approach to the Chinese. For what reason do we have to be timid? We are a nuclear power. We've got friends like the Americans and the Israelis. Why do we need? We got the Quad. Why do we need to be timid? It's appeasement from the last 15 years of the Chinese. Every time they say something, we all get into huddle. They should not be allowed to dictate to our political leadership and say you can't go to Arunachal, you can't go here.
You brought me to one of my questions. Ambassador Garcetti is on record about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, to say that he was asked about Quad and he said India is in the driver's seat. What I read out of it is that Quad is there. It's India who's sitting in the driver's seat. It's India who's going to dictate where do we take Quad next. At the moment, it's a avowed economic program alliance between these
It's
two.
a stationary vehicle.
It's a stationary vehicle, it hasn't got a movement yet. So, we are also hedging. I'm not a diplomat, I don't have access to anything, but I think we are also trying to keep our eat our cake and save it too. So, we are saying there is a Quad, but we don't want to commit more to it because we're waiting for China to say we are agreeing with you and we are now against Indian genie, bye bye.
Even the Quad, everybody talks about it, but even a simple thing like the Indian Ocean, there's a difference in definition of the Indian Ocean. How do you, which is the area you view as the Indian Ocean, which is the area America views as the Indian Ocean? There's a vast difference. America says it is till the east coast of India, we say it is till the east coast of Africa.
What about the new, what you said Pakistan, China as an axis, what about the new Russia, China axis? So that also has a new bearing on our relationship
That will
with
have,
China?
but so what I'm saying is, so if you say Quad, the Quad is, see, you look at India as a land continental part, but actually the reality is that all your land borders are sea. You go out only from the sea.
Yeah, but I also want to
So you have no trade going through Pakistan, you have no trade going through China, and then you had a border with Afghanistan, which is a POK, you have no trade going there.
So Jagat, what my understanding would be, the limited sense that I have, that if you went ahead with Quad and made a military alliance, none of the countries have a border with China.
Firstly,
We are
alliance.
the only ones, and he's saying, no, they can come through Pakistan, they can come through Afghanistan.
No, but
Our entire border is
again, the
one.
armed I mean, now you said we don't go back into history, whatever, but officially we've never, and sirs will be there, you've never gone on any alliance. That's something that word is taboo. So today you talk of strategic autonomy, and earlier you talked of non-alignment. But both these, they mean the same thing. It actually, are you equidistant from the major powers? The answer is no. You always tilted towards somebody, or you leant towards, aligned towards somebody, or you aligned to your interests. So we were aligned against China at some time, and the only country that came to your aid in 1962 to a large degree was America. US was the only one who came to your aid. At that time, Russia never came to your aid because there were two preoccupied with what was happening in Cuba. So they looked away from you. And US came to your aid, and a fallout of that was we never used our Air Force, but Nehru wrote a letter which is now come out in writing, and the first chap who wrote about it was a guy called Bruce Riddell, who was the CIA guy, right? And in that letter, he had written for assistance as far as aircraft were concerned from US to help us. We never used our own Air Force, we wanted their Air Force to come. So just before the war ended, two gentlemen came from America. They were sent by Kennedy post this letter. One guy was a diplomat, his ambassador at large, a guy called Averell Harriman. And the other guy was the head of the Strategic Force Commander, who was an American general, Air Force general. And next day also, the unilateral ceasefire.
We'll go aggressive.
Yeah, so I'm coming. After this letter, there was an air defense exercise held in India for the responsibility and security of India's airspace,
Shakti.
and Suraksha was the name, and US, and to widen it so that it's not 1-to-1, Australia and UK were also part of it. And after that, there was what they called an ADA, Air Defense Agreement between India and US, and that then died a natural death after 65. And then following that, 65, China was neutral, 62, China attacked, 65, China was the one who planned the operations for Pakistan. 71, China was neutral.
You see India moving forward on Quad
I think
as a new government comes in?
I think
Or will we wait longer for China to...
yeah. I think we are very sensitive to China for the reasons that you mentioned. If you remember, Quad actually began with the 2004 tsunami crisis. And it was in the humanitarian response to the tsunami crisis that the Americans got the idea that perhaps, starting with humanitarian response, disaster response, we can start building a kind of coalition. And the general idea was that it was going to move in a kind of Quad mill direction. People already started talking about an Asian NATO, if you remember that. We got into a funk. And in fact, the subsequent turn, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, the subsequent turn towards a more kind of economic strategic grouping, supply chain resilience and stuff like that, was because basically we were perceived as the ones who are not willing to take this in a more military direction because it would be provocative to China. And it would be. Your point that we are the only country that actually has a border and has a boundary problem and has a larger kind of geopolitical contestation with China. These are good enough reasons for us to do that.
I don't agree about a formal security alliance, but I mean definitely we need certain closer linkages with, and we have to maintain linkages with both Russia, China, and today we have 4 countries who we depend heavily on military things. Russia, China, France and Israel. These are 4 lots where we get
China?
No, I mean Russia, US, Israel and
That's
I was
great.
yeah,
wondering
You
about
said
Russia,
China.
Russia, US.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You know, my view is slightly different. First of all, we don't have border disputes with Pakistan and China. We have major territorial disputes. You know, it's not something which a cartographer
No,
can
no.
resolve. You have, you know, you're talking about Pakistan claiming the whole of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
And
It's not
China
something
also.
of China claiming Arunachal Pradesh. These are major territorial disputes which are not going to be resolved quickly. Secondly, I think for military planning purposes, it's good to plan for Pakistan and China acting in alliance. But, and this is a very big but, we should always guard against self-fulfilling prophecy. I think there is a tendency in India to think that something which is theoretically possible is happening right now. It's not. You know, China and Pakistan have different military perspectives on India. Nobody can explain why post Galwan, when you were really stretched in Ladakh, why did the Pakistanis agree to a ceasefire on the LOC at that time? There's no reasonable explanation if the two were acting in tactical coordination.
I would just like to make a point here.
Thirdly, you know, if I can just finish. Thirdly, and this I will put somewhat crudely because there's not enough time, I think we have an excessively idealistic view of the United States when we talk about military alliances with Western partners or with the US. You know, because our sons and daughters live in the US, we see it as a benign force. Actually, it's not. They act in their own interests.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to coordinate with them to some extent. Yes, for intelligence purposes, Quad can be useful. But let's not forget that none of them, as you said, deal with China as an immediate
Neighbor and
those are countries which are in a totally different orbit. You cannot compare yourself with the UK or Australia or US because you look at those countries are at a different existential level than you are. So I don't think we should get carried away. I think the diasporic influence on our foreign policy is extreme and it has to be corrected. Certainly a course correction is required.
Let me just one point I want to make is that the Chinese stake in Pakistan is very, very strong. It's almost an existential issue for them, the survival of Pakistan, because their Belt and Road Initiative brings the oil and the gas option from Gwadar up to Xinjiang because they have a Malacca Strait problem that 90% of their oil used to go through the Malacca Straits and that could be blocked by the US and say the Indians or the Japanese at any point of time. Now they have an option that from Pakistan it goes by land all the way up to northern China. It also is much cheaper. So as regards the flow of oil and gas to the Chinese economy and as regards the generation of electricity, which is very important for their semiconductor industry, which has got relocated in Xinjiang, electricity and water are the 2 major raw materials apart from sand for building semiconductors. Pakistan is very vital. They are integrated. The Pakistan army is integrated with the PLA and the PLA is based in POK. So let's not delude ourselves about that. They will not let...
You're right, and so just this point, there is too much of cooperation. They are 2 different entities, I agree, but we cannot rule this out. That
No, as I said, for military planning purposes, it's good to plan.
Yes. So
But you know, when you bring military planning into popular narratives or into foreign policy, strategic planning, it's a different issue.
so that is
No,
the answer.
we
But
can't
I think,
do-
I think
we
you
can't
see
do
the
that.
collusive threat also varies from level to level. So the
you see, in Gilgit, Baltistan, to take on from where he's saying. Today you have retired military officers of Pakistan who are part of this CPEC. They are learning Mandarin, their children are learning Mandarin, they're all getting involved with working on the CPEC.
I have a more jaundiced view of CPEC. I think we have exaggerated its.
No, that may
I think
be.
the Chinese are also realizing that
Yeah, it's not working too well.
It's not going to work.
But all said and done, the
No.
point is the involvement of these two militaries, we cannot rule out. And
No,
we should always plan, like you said,
You
plan
see, I think-
for a worst case scenario.
No, for military planning, you always plan on the basis of capacity. Because if the potential exists, then a threat exists. So you have to plan accordingly. But you cannot make foreign policy and strategic planning on the basis of capacity alone. It also has to be based on number of other factors. Otherwise, we'll be in the trenches all the time. If you just start reacting to potential threats and capacity.
No, we don't need to react, we need to anticipate. That was my point.
No, I think for planning purposes, it's good.
No, to your question about course correction on China. See, course correction on China, the gap has gone so far that it will take a long-term strategy to do that course correction. Whether with the new government, if the government is the same, whether that kind of course correction will even begin, I doubt. Because what we are going to see is that this relationship that has been developed over 10 years will continue into the next 5 years. And if a new government comes into power, it is possible that there is a course correction, but the actual evolution of that
New
course
means
correction-
an alternate.
alternate. If an alternate government, then maybe there is a chance for a course correction, but it will be a difficult one and it will be a long one, and we will go through some very tough times on that. And on this point, I agree with TCA Raghavan that what is plausible and what is probable are two very different scenarios.
One very critical issue, and I'm really grateful to senior police officer Neeraj Kumar. 20 years ago, we as a relatively undeveloped country, were the first, I think, major country in the world who was facing the threat of terror. And we were emerging and being seen worldwide as incapable of handling terror. हम तो बेचारे कहीं यहाँ bomb blast हो जाता है, कहीं कुछ हो जाता है. Those poor guys can't fend for themselves. Then suddenly this terror became an international phenomenon. It's there as a threat all over Europe. It's a threat all over US. It's a threat even in China. It's a threat all over. So I'm asking the question that in this global play, India's role, how much terror is playing a part in terms of cooperation, in terms of alignments. Is that going the right way? Because terror is in everybody's backyard.
I think the international cooperation on the front of terror has been extremely satisfactory, especially our various treaties with US and other countries who have helped us a lot in building our capacities. At one time, we were seen as always at the receiving end. But you may have seen how the incidents of terror have come down in recent years. And here I like to point out that unlike earlier times, when the threat was emanating mostly from Pakistan, my sense is that we have to be very careful with Bangladesh as well, because a lot of terrorist activities are now shifting to Bangladesh. They're going to use Bangladesh as the launching pad for various terror groups. And God forbid if there is any instability in Bangladesh, if the present regime, the BNP, say at some level, at some stage, that fails and the Awami League and others come in, then there is going to be a major threat from Bangladesh. So our focus should be, I don't know how far my diplomat friends would agree with this view. more or less we have managed to deal with terror successfully, and we have very good partnerships with other countries who are affected by terror. Our intel coordinations have also improved tremendously. For instance, a lot of our inputs come from Israel, and other countries. So we have to build on all that. But in future, going into the future, we have to be very careful with Bangladesh. That is all I can say. I don't know whether you have any view over it.
Am I right in saying that terror is probably more devastating in potential than armies standing on borders?
That's why
Because
it is
terror
called
can
this-
strike you sitting at home ensconced in your living rooms.
That's why it is called proxy war.
Proxy war.
And now the new phase of terror also is the cyber wars, is the chip thing. There was an item today that some 8,000 vehicles of BMW and all the rest, they have a chip which can be used and blocked.
So they have a back door where they can take charge of the vehicle, which is all because of the Chinese chips. Now the Chinese chips are the most potent weapon that they have, and they did this with this American destroyer, which in 2015 the propulsion system collapsed in its trial. This Zumwalt, Admiral Zumwalt, it was a multi-billion-dollar ship, and the propulsion system collapsed because the Chinese microchips, which were cheap, were installed in the ship system. So they had to then remove all the Chinese stuff. So that's a big thing, and all the Russian equipment that comes out of Russia has Chinese electronics. So all of them have got back doors built into it. So we're very vulnerable because of that.
So 5 minutes, last 5 minutes, individual takes from the evening.
Well, I just will make two brief points. Firstly, I think on terrorism, the point made is quite right that our technological capacities have improved tremendously because our external interfaces have strengthened. The second point is that I think the new government, the challenges are the same. The two central issues, which are the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel situation with Gaza, they have a salutary lesson for us. That don't take your neighborhood for granted and try to invest in a diplomatic and political dialogue, no matter how serious the problem. Because the last place you want to be is like between Russia and Ukraine, where neither side is going to win.
These wars will not end.
No, they won't end. Or like Russia, Israel and Gaza. I mean, we depend on Gaza, but the fellows can't predict what is going to happen to them because
Even
of
the
their,
Israeli
of their own hubris.
But just for my curiosity, did Russia think it was going to be a short war?
I think so.
Initially,
wouldn't have gone in otherwise.
Initially,
They
they
thought
thought.
in 4 days they'll
Yeah,
have
You see,
They
they,
have-
to the extent that when they went into the northern area, the Kiev area, those people were carrying ceremonial uniforms because they thought they'll march through the streets of Kiev. They thought that the Zelensky government will collapse and they'll install their own government, pro-Russian person in place. And like sir has adequately brought out, these two ongoing conflicts have major lessons for us, which are seriously affecting the way we
What are
thought.
those lessons?
Well, the first lesson is we always started all our discussions with short and swift war based on our experience in 1971. That is over. It's long attritional wars back again. And to fight a long attritional war, you have to have sustenance, and sustenance across equipment, across supplies, across trained manpower. So I mean, it's a huge, huge
and technology
and technology.
cyber
That's coming
warfare
to that.
and drone warfare.
Next is every country has to develop hard power. There's no shortcut. The deterrence will only lie with hard power. The third thing is that he has turned nuclear thing on its head. When nuclear weapons first came out, nuclear weapons came out to end the war. After that, that was in US and World War II. After that, nuclear weapons were always used to deter a war. 5 countries had it, they deterred fighting each other during Cold War. Putin has turned that all on its head. He says nuclear weapons, I've got a nuclear weapon. Because I've got a nuclear weapon, that gives me the power to carry out a war.
To use it.
To use it, to threaten use of it. Now whether he uses it or not. Next thing, the war has taught us, it's precision weapons. Where's our technology? Where's your PGMs to guide? What is our stock holding today? Sad to hear. Then is the cost. What is the cost of defending a lightweight thing like a drone? You spend more money in knocking the drone down than the cost of the drone. Is it worth it? What is the damage it can cause? These are something that
And where to get that drone? To get him in the air or get him on the ground?
Yeah.
It is more cost effective to get him on the ground before he takes off. You know, this is actually in that last article that both of us wrote. And there is more to it. If I may add to what you said, you need more than building military equipment, you need a strong industrial base that can sustain a battle. Okay, that is the most important.
And
you should not look for the first round fired and you're looking for ammunition.
That's got wiped out in the last 20 years.
And this, you know, we
And that
always
means our
build our
capacity.
stocks and suddenly we lose our stocks for various reasons. Suddenly there's some accident which takes place and that ammunition is segregated and it comes out. Then you go running left, right. So,
Sorry.
and then you have to have a today you cannot manage just with the public sector. It has to be a mix of public and private sector because a private sector can get in certain technologies which are denied to a public sector. So you have to have a mix. And you have to have an interface between this which is not there and the government. There's hardly anything. You had a place set up in CII called SIDM. That is now, earlier twice it was added for army officers. After that, that's been forgotten, discarded, gone to the wind. First person who added it was the General Saha, and then he stood for election, and that's the end of everything. So, and the last thing which has come out from these conflicts, which there's something you have to have a backing of a UN permanent member of the Security Council. Look at the two conflicts that have taken place. Russia is doing what it can in spite of anybody saying whatever they want because they are member of the Security Council with a veto vote. And Israel, everybody is saying genocide, 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 you're crying horse, but they're backed by US. So you have to have a backing of something. So when you talk of alliance, I don't say security alliance, but you have to be close to some country who will give you that backing all the time.
Political and military alliance.
You can't say we do something against China does something against us.
So what is a strong country? A strong country, is it a strong country that has just got lot of military force? Or is the strong country
Sense of nationalism. Sense of nationalism,
It has a
pride
cohesive
in
society.
Cohesive
It
society.
has tolerance and dignity and
we are
respect
thinking
for
that
Pride.
force gives us
So somebody said
Consensus is
that
most
is it
important.
strong because military is
India
strong
is a
because of economic or strong because you have a happy
continental federal
lot of
policy.
citizens.
There is
Your
nothing
people-
about
your
consensus.
people are-
famous exchange with
CMP.
Armenians in the NDC.
Has to be with comprehensive national thought. I mean, all these things form part of it. Each one of them.
So China is way ahead of us on that.
So we've already stated that.
No, but somewhere the message should go that the new government to fight globally.
Are you going to change the genes of the...
That is the issue. There is a DNA issue.
No,
in DNA.
it's a very simple exercise. It's a little more difficult than you imagine. We have to stop believing in Wranglers and Levi's.
Start wearing
We
chinos.
must make our own jeans as part of Made in India program.
back to